all been enjoying the Olympics over the last week or so. Watching the Olympics suddenly reminded me of the importance of athlete sport and participation in children with ADHD. A couple of months ago, I read a book by a famous psychologist who is a world authority in ADHD, Professor Russell Barkley. And he spoke about his treatment of Michael Phelps. You might remember a couple of years ago in the Olympics where Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals in the pool. And he's one of those icons and role models for ADHD. And it reminded me of the importance of helping parents and yourselves have an understanding. If you have a child with ADHD that's on medication and who participates in sports, you might have wondered why and how there is the connection and how you can overcome those preconceptions and problems of taking medication and participating in sport. This is something that has been dealt with at very high levels. And in South Africa, a therapeutic exemption for use of medication is something I deal with in my practice from time to time, particularly when children and, dare I say, young adults are participating at sports at very high levels, provincial levels, as well as international levels. Over the years, I've dealt with some children that are amazing sports and athletes people. Off-road biking, mountain biking. You know, you've really got to be able to kind of concentrate, focus. They're going down steep inclines, off-road, competing at very high levels, and taking medication is vital. So you might think about the fact that in the Olympics, anybody who has ADHD and takes a medication like a stimulant would be excluded, and that would be wrong. You know, it's so important to get a very long track record of ADHD. You know, ADHD medication is used and sometimes abused. It can certainly be a huge advantage to an athlete, but if you have ADHD and you have a consistent history of being treated over many years, right from a time that a child is young, and particularly even in the Olympics. So, you know, these applications for therapeutic exemptions are done, and they are applications we do and deal with this. So I thought I'd help you understand what this is all about. What is the impact of ADHD on athletes and the effect of sport participation? First of all, the impact on the athlete themselves. There is a higher incidence of excellent athletes and participants in Olympics of athletes with ADHD. There's a higher incidence. So if you took the incidence in the general population of about 6 or 7%, there's probably 8 or 9% of athletes participating in the Olympics with ADHD, not because they're on stimulant medication assisting them, but because they often excel. They tend to sort of compensate and excel. They've got energy, they've got commitment, they've got drive, just to help you understand that there are superpowers associated with ADHD. The impact of ADHD on the risk of sports-related injuries. If they're not on their medication, they're often going to injure themselves impulsively, taking risks that are beyond what would be acceptable. And then, of course, the treatment of the athletes themselves with medication. It's vital that they take their medication all the time, not only for the physical risks, but mental health. And it's something that I'm going to talk about just now. You might have read that Simone Biles was participating in the Tokyo Olympics and has recently pulled out. Now, in another video, I'm going to talk about the cultural attitudes towards ADHD. So in Japan, they don't think the condition exists, although the rest of the world really kind of accepts the fact. ADHD medication is banned in Japan. However, Simone Biles was allowed to take her medication because she had a therapeutic exemption for the use of the medication. And I suppose, you know, this is so important to understand the mental health and the holistic management of somebody with ADHD. So it looks like she's pulled out because of mental health reasons. So what I've done is I've pulled up the World Anti-Doping Agency's kind of a manifesto and guidelines for the treatment of ADHD and the use of stimulants to help, alleviate any concerns that parents have. So, although it's a banned substance, if you have ADHD and you've had it and it's been properly diagnosed over time, you are allowed to use that medication. And this is taken from the World Anti-Doping Agency, which, as you can imagine, are very strict. And you can see the diagnosis needs to be made performed by a pediatrician, psychiatrist, or a physician who specializes in ADHD. So if you have a child who needs to take their medication and you've heard rumor mongering and everybody saying your child can't take their medication and participate, nonsense. We can sort it out. This is something even by the World Anti-Doping Agency allows. And then, of course, I'd like to talk about Michael Phelps, an amazing, amazing athlete who, the story that I heard from Russell Barkley was saying that his mother was a school headmistress and was the force behind Michael in motivating him. And he was somebody that used medication, but somehow, while he was training and in the pool, he didn't need his medication, showing how important exercise is in maintaining and managing ADHD. So medication was used in the classroom and his studies, but he didn't seem to use the medication in the same way when he was doing sports, because in a way it's like releasing dopamine in the front of the brain. Exercise is a management and treatment of ADHD. So I thought this would give you some kind of background and help to understand, if you have a child who's a good athlete, takes medication, don't stress. It's something that can be applied for, dealt with, and it's important that your child takes their medication all the time.